Well, I'm very grateful that I'm not preaching on any of those very obscure texts this morning. Thanks be to God. And it is St. Francis Day. And I just want to pass around, I have this in my study. It was something that I found in California years ago, and it's a beautiful hand-painted design for a stained glass window. And we think they're probably 1940s, 50s, and it depicts Francis preaching to the birds in this whirlwind of birds. And the second one is he's talking to the wolf of Gubbio. Anybody been to Gubbio?
Yes.
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 Awesome. So I wanted to retell the story of St. Francis and the wolf of Gubbio. And it actually has a really important message for our day, because it's about kind of facing our fear. It's about listening attentively to things that we may not, and people that we may not listen to, and kind of mediating a different way of seeing life and reconciliation. And it's actually a wonderful story. And I want to kind of weave it into what's going on in our world today. There was in Italy the town of Gubbio, a prosperous village that had a great problem. A wolf was eating their livestock and attacking the people. Nothing the townspeople did protected them from the wolf. Never had they seen such a fierce predator. He killed the shepherd, then the shepherd's brother and father, when they went out to deal with the menace. The next morning, the town was abuzz with the story told by the shepherd's mother and sisters. The mayor of Gubbio announced he would send 3 of his best guards to find and slay the wolf that very afternoon. Are we all listening? At dusk, the townspeople could hear shouts and clashing of metal from the woods. It was quiet. The guards had met. The wolf is here. Late in the night, the only survivor of the encounter struggled into the anxious town and collapsed. After he was revived, he told his tale of their fight with the fierce and powerful wolf. As the story rushed through town, the wolf grew larger and more ferocious. The wolf was huge. Fear was in the eyes of everyone in Gubbio. Children were kept close by, weapons at the ready at the defense as the town raised. The mayor consulted with his advisors and decided to see if Francis of Assisi could help them. They had heard that he could talk to animals and that God talked to him. Kind of early horse whisperer. Several brave messengers were sent to find Francis and ask him for his help. And he was moved by their plight and wanted to do what he could. And he said they could leave in the morning and they should eat and rest with his brothers that night. And after dinner they prayed with Francis for a solution and slept that night with hope in their hearts. Dawn found them walking down the hill from Assisi on their way to Gubbio. In time they arrived at the woods near the town. The messengers pointed to that place where the wolf had slain the 2 guards not far from the road. The gate to the town was open, and they arrived and quickly closed behind them. The entire town followed Francis to the town square, where the mayor eagerly met them. They went into the town hall to eat and discuss what Francis would do with the wolf. And the mayor wondered what Francis would do with such a challenge. The mayor hated the wolf. He knew the men who were killed and their families. One of the guards was a cousin to the mayor's wife. If he were younger, he would have led the guards after the wolf himself. And he wanted Francis to strike the wolf dead or send him to the town of Spoleto, the enemy. Either would satisfy a need for revenge and stop the attacks. Francis listened as the mayor described what had happened to their peaceful town. He had much empathy for the families of the victims and wanted to meet the wolf and hear his story too. Francis stated that in the next morning he would go to the woods himself to see if he could find the wolf. That night he prayed for the wisdom to find a solution. Early the next morning, Francis was accompanied by the townspeople to the gates of Gubbio. They wished him well and retreated to their homes, locking the gates behind Francis. They were afraid that he would share the fate of the shepherds and the guards. He walked on to the woods, ready to engage the wolf, and as he neared the first stand of trees, the wolf appeared and began to stalk Francis. The wolf was huge. His slow, deliberate steps, the walk of a predator, announced his intention. He drew nearer and nearer, closing in a circle around the holy man of Assisi. Seeing the wolf, Francis felt a connection. He made the sign of the cross, and he called the wolf to come and meet him in peace under the grace of the Lord. The wolf watched as Francis came closer. "Come, brother wolf, I won't hurt you. Let us talk in peace." The wolf froze in mid-step. It struggled with doubt and uncertainty. Finally, understanding that Francis meant him no harm, the wolf walked to Francis and sat back on his haunches, ready to listen. Francis told the wolf that he had come from Gubbio and described what the townspeople were experiencing because of the wolf's actions. He described the pain and resentment that they held towards the wolf. "How did this come to happen?" Francis asked the wolf. "Why did you kill the livestock and the people?" The wolf told Francis his story. He had been left behind by his pack because he was injured and couldn't keep up. He could only catch prey that didn't run fast like sheep or goats. He really preferred to eat deer and rabbits. But with his injured leg, that was out of the question. He explained to Francis that all he wanted to do was to eat when he was hungry. Francis implored him to explain his actions. The wolf continued, "The first shepherd he had killed was trying to protect his flock, and the wolf had no choice but to fight back and kill him. That afternoon, 2 more men came after him, and instinct took over. He quickly killed them, leaving their bodies where they fell. The next day, the 3 guards came hunting him. He was only defending himself when he fought them. 2 were slain. As the 3rd man was no longer a threat, he let him go." Francis could see that the wolf was only acting to fill his needs. He had made unfortunate choices that affected people of whom he knew nothing. Through Francis, the wolf was able to feel the pain of the people of Gubbio, and he felt remorse. He was sorry for the pain he caused, but he needed to eat. What could he do? Hours passed as Francis prayed for a solution. The wolf watched closely, not fully understanding what was taking place, and when he finished praying, he made a suggestion that could meet the needs of both the town and the wolf. He proposed to the wolf that the townspeople could feed him, and in return, the wolf would stop killing the people and their livestock. The wolf thought this would work well for him, but worried the people would still want to kill him. He knew they could let go of their fear and hate if he saw the wolf ask for forgiveness and accede to a peaceful relationship. Francis extended his hand, and the wolf showed agreement by placing his paw in Francis' hand. St. Francis and the wolf then walked back to Gubbio. As they neared the gate, the citizens couldn't believe their eyes. Francis and the wolf continued all the way into the town square, and the mayor and the entire town watched with hate and fear. The wolf had to keep his eyes on Francis to still his own fear. Francis called out, "Come, countrymen, the wolf will not hurt you. Let us talk in peace. I have spoken with the wolf, and he apologizes for his actions, and he wants to make amends." Francis told them the wolf's story. He has the same needs as you and only wants to eat and not go hungry. Can the people of Gubbio feed him, as he promises to never again take the lives of the people and their animals? Remember, our Savior taught forgiveness. He taught us to love even our enemies. The citizens returned skeptical stares. Francis continued, "This will be your wolf. He can't be killed or passed off to Spoleto or Perugia. He will serve the town as a defender as long as he will live." So the people of Gubbio talked with each other for hours. Relatives of the dead were the hardest to convince. They harbored a hard place in their hearts for the wolf. Francis wept with them and touched them in a way that softened their hearts. Finally, after many tears, they found compassion for the wolf. At Francis' suggestion, they addressed him as Brother Wolf. Francis asked the mayor and Brother Wolf to declare a pact. The people would be safe from the wolf would be safe from them. Everyone expressed joy that the shadow of fear had been lifted from their town. The wife of the shepherd, the man who was the first to fall, brought out food to feed Brother Wolf. She was crying in relief to have the burden of hate lifted from her spirit. Brother Wolf was humbled when he found his apology accepted. More food was brought out, and soon everyone was eating together. Word spread to other towns. Soon the people of Gubbio were proclaiming proudly that they had a special wolf, Brother Wolf. He lived another 2 years like that until he died, cared for by the generous and forgiving town of Gubbio. Now you can all go to bed. Now I love that story because it holds many, many truths, many very interesting Christian themes of reconciliation and facing our fear and connecting with each other in a different way. It's a very powerful story. And the compassion of walking in another person's shoes, to hear the story, often is to accept and also to figure out a solution. And I think that's working in mediation and reconciliation. That's a big part, allowing people to tell their story. And often to hear the story is to understand more and to accept more than maybe we do today. We think about that in our world today. And I think in particular, since we last celebrated St. Francis Day, the Pope Francis released the encyclical, Laudamus Si, which is using the words of Francis, with this huge problem of climate change and global warming that we see all around us, and how we each can tell our story and have a responsibility to be able to change the course of that we live in this fragile planet Earth, and so on. So it's very wonderful to see the connection, again, between Francis and this big problem that we have in our world today. It begins, the encyclical, "Praise be to you, my Lord." In the words of this beautiful canticle, says Pope Francis, St. Francis of Assisi reminds us that our common home is like a sister with whom we share our life and a beautiful mother who opens her arms to embrace us. Praise be to you, my Lord, through our sister, Mother Earth, who sustains and governs us and who produces various fruit with colored flowers and herbs. The sister now cries out to us because of the harm we have inflicted on her by our irresponsible use and abuse of the goods with which God has endowed her. We have come to see ourselves as her lords and masters, entitled to plunder her at our will. The violence present in our hearts, wounded by sin, is also reflected in the symptoms of sickness, evident in the soil, in the water, in the air, and in all forms of life. This is why the earth herself, burdened and laid waste, is among the most abandoned and maltreated of our poor. She groans in travail. We have forgotten that we ourselves are dust of the earth. Our very bodies are made up of her elements. We breathe her air, and we receive life and refreshment from her waters. And it was interesting that this very inspired and scientifically sound, the Pope, a friend of mine who's a major marine biologist, was actually in the Vatican. Francis gathered some of the top scientists in the world to work on this piece of, very significant piece of work, where religion and science usually are not in agreement. On this, they were in agreement. And it was a kind of theological platform for the Paris conference the end of last year, when something like 195 countries, including the United States, agreed to pollution-cutting provisions with the goal of preventing the average global temperature from rising to more than 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial time. So that was an amazing achievement to be able to get that kind of agreement. And Francis of Assisi, talk about mediation and listening to one another. Again, he is the spirit behind this remarkable piece of work. I bring it back to our own community. The Carey Institute is right here in Millbrook, and I'm so impressed by what Josh Ginsberg and his team are doing there. It is so remarkable. And he wrote, in response to the Paris conference, he says this: as extreme weather events increase in frequency and intensity, people are starting to believe that climate change is a reality and that the release of greenhouse gas is the cause. If you accept climate change as a reality that's getting worse, then you have to do something about it. And the few climate change deniers in Congress will have a harder and harder time having their ideas accepted. Nor should we underestimate the impact of Pope Francis's encyclical. People of all faiths were moved by the intelligence of what he had to say. Faith can be an important bridge to environmental issues, and environmental justice will increasingly be at the heart of the issues. As for the Carey Institute, their scientists are providing the data that is needed to understand and mitigate the impacts of a warming planet. He quotes, Ginsberg quotes Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who said, "You're entitled to your opinions, but not to your own facts." You're entitled to your opinions, but not to your own facts. And at Carey, we try to provide the decision makers with the facts they need to form their opinions. We do science that helps define the problem and then find solutions to those problems. Last year I visited the center, and there was this young young mother, who was looking for the animal that's going to carry the next pandemic disease in the world. She's researching which animal. You think about a flea, a mouse, Zika. And it's interesting, right here in our community, that's going on. Amazing. It's going to impact the world. And they're also doing some interesting research on the effects of pharmaceuticals in the water. So the pills that we're taking, that's going into rivers, that's going into plants, that's going into animals, and talk about how we're all connected. And Carey is leading that research right here in our community. So we all have work to do, and supporting Carey is a great way to do that. Josh was here last night at the party, and actually the Millbrook magazine, he's on the front cover. He and his wife and his daughter, they've got stars in our midst. So let me end with Pope Francis' prayer as we bring the celebration of the legacy of Francis and what it means today. God of love, show us our place in this world as channels of your love for all the creatures of this earth, for not one of them is forgotten in your sight. Enlighten those who possess power and money, that they may avoid the sin of indifference, that they may love the common good, advance the weak, and care for this world in which we live. The poor and the earth are crying out, O Lord, seize us with your power and light. Help us to protect all life, to prepare for a better future, for the coming of your kingdom of justice, peace, love, and beauty. Praise be to you.